Ah, you're just in time. Pull up a chair next to the fire. Get yourself comfortable and let me tell you one of the many Legends of Ellaria. Tonight's legend is a tale of a band of cutthroats I hope you never have the misfortune to meet on a dark night. Everyone from the newborn toddler to the old codger on his deathbed can tell you tales of the Blood Gem Gang, but not a one of them knows where the name came from. Many assume that they had a penchant for rubies and garnets and the like with a deep red colour akin to blood. They're wrong, fools a lot of them, but it doesn't stop them spreading the stories to increase their own self-importance. Some others think it's because they stole gems for use in blood magic. They're even more wrong than the other fools and just as full of themselves. I know the truth because I was there when they got the name. I've been a bard for more years than I care to remember. I've regaled high-born nobles with stories of great feats of valour and entertained the lowest of brigands with the bawdiest of songs. I've worked in royal palaces and dives you wouldn't send your worst enemy to. Such is the life of a travelling bard. It was at one such low establishment that I first ran into the Blood Gem Gang, or to be more accurate, they ran into me. It was 9 years ago, almost to the day. The place was called the Lion's Head, but the locals just referred to it as the Head, because more people pissed in the corner than went outside to use the ditch. It was a one-room pub with not enough room to swing a cat, let alone a lion, and to call it a room was being generous. At least the roof kept out most of the rain, and it didn't smell as bad after your 10th mead. It was a foul night, the kind when not even the devil himself wants to venture out, and I was glad of the roof over me head and the fire at me arse. I was telling the story the bishop and the chancellor's maid. I just got to the part where the lady of the house walks in at the two of them, vigorously praising the Lord, if you get me drift, when the door burst open. A chorus of "Shut that bloody door" went up from the patrons as the gang of little scuts came barreling into the place. One of them pulled up just short of me, but the others couldn't halt their momentum, and they bumped into each other like dominoes. It would be comical if they hadn't almost knocked me into the raging fire. Only my quick thinking and reflexes allowed me to seize the mantle and prevent me plunging arse first into the grate. Despite the risk to me life and limb, the patrons seemed to find it hilarious. I fixed him with a scowl and vowed not to finish the story. That'd teach him to poke fun at a hard-working man whose only wish is to entertain him. If they want to see pratfalls, the landlord can hire a jester next time. When the laughter died down, all eyes turned to the new arrivals. Half of them hadn't started shaving yet, and those that had seemed to have cut more skin than hair. They looked around sheepishly, all bar one who stared defiance at anyone who met his eye. I'd find out later that this was Connor, the leader of the gang. I've some gems to sell, and I hear this is the place to do it, he announced to the air. There followed a silence, the kind of silence that descends just before great violence is about to happen. The moment seemed to stretch on into eternity. The only sound were the crackle of the fire and the storm raging outside. Then a voice spoke and broke the spell. How did a group of runts like you lot come by a single gem, let alone gems to sell? Asked the stout man sat in the corner closest to the bar. This is Morden, a dealer in all things too hot to handle, but a specialist in precious stones. Why do you want to know? We got gems, and if you got the gold, they're yours, Connor spat. It's not as simple as that, young fella, replied Morden. See, if I give you my gold and take the gems, then the original owner or a lawman might come to take them back. You'll still have my gold, but I'll be left with no gems, and a pain in me arse dealing with some uppity lord or sheriff. There won't be anyone to claim them back, nor talk to a sheriff, you have my word on that, said Connor. I don't know you from Jack, so your word of honour is as much use as a one-legged man in an arse-kicking competition. So why don't you tell me how you got these gems, and I'll decide if I'll take them off your hands. With that, Connor began his story. The boys are from an orphanage in Brackhill that had closed due to lack of funds. A local merchant had bought the building and turfed out the 30 boys for whom it was the only place they'd ever called home. He was going to turn it into a bawdy house, and he had no use of the boys. Well, most of the boys. He did keep on half a dozen of the prettier boys for clients with specific desires. The merchant only came once, but when he did, the boys noted his fine clothes and bejeweled hands. Seeing this, Connor began to formulate a plan. He sent two of the fastest runners through the forest in opposite directions to check which road the merchant took out of town. The director of the orphanage was an old cantankerous sort by the name of Stern, and that he was. He used his fists and his tongue liberally to cut the boys down at every opportunity, and he made no secret of the fact that he'd be glad to see the back of him. He told the boys they had to be out before the noble returned in 3 days' time. Knowing that the merchant would return along the high road in 3 days, the boys staked out the road from the forest. Not wanting to miss the merchant should he arrive early, Connor set a watch on the road and the boys took it in shifts to watch day and night. When not on watch, the boys busied themselves making rudimentary spears and bows. The third day arrived and a nervous energy rang through the mateship camp. Everyone was on tenterhooks in anticipation of the call from the boys on watch. They were wound up like springs, ready to burst into action. As the day wore on and there was no sign of the merchant, the tension spilled over in the form of heated exchanges and scuffles between the boys. Tired of breaking these up, Connor sent the culprits out to hunt, fetch water or gather firewood. Thus it was their numbers were seriously depleted when the call finally came. Connor led the boys to a bend in the road and peered down. There was no sign of the merchant or his riches. He was about to send a boy up ahead to ask the scouts if they were sure, when he heard a low rumble like distant thunder. It grew louder, and soon horsemen crested the hill. They were closely followed by a carriage, and another set of horsemen. 2 men sat atop the carriage, with 4 riders ahead, and 2 at the rear. 8 in all, a tall order for Connor's ragtag group of ruffians. The only blood they'd ever spilled had been in fistfights, when a nose or two was broken in retort to a particularly stinging jibe. But all that was about to change. The first to cross the line from ruffian to murderer was a tall boy named Adnan. He was gangly and awkward, but he was the best shot of all the boys. Connor told him what he needed him to do. As the boys stalked him, the guards joked and laughed back and forth, oblivious to the eyes that watched them from the trees. The driver took great pleasure in regaling the rest of the crew with the story of his mate's first time at a whore the night before. The man sat next to him went beet red. No one could see it in the darkness, but they could sense his discomfort, and this egged the driver on even further. Then I heard him ask where we were supposed to put it, he shouted to raucous laughter. The laughter was cut short as an arrow appeared in the centre of his chest. He looked down in disbelief as a red stain grew on his tunic. The driver turned as if to say something to his companion, but instead he pitched forward and off the carriage and down in between the harnessed horses. His arrival and the smell of blood spooked the horses and they bolted. The driver's mate was thrown clear of the carriage and it only came to a halt once it had collided with a tree. One of the horses lay crumpled and dead, while the other screamed in pain as it had broken its front legs as the weight of the carriage lodged in the tree. The guards got up to the stricken carriage and formed a defensive ring around it to protect their lord. The lead guard, Steadley, a grizzled ex-soldier, stared in disbelief as the boys emerged from the forest all around them. He and his men were outnumbered 2 to 1, but some of the boys weren't even half his size. They got one lucky shot on Billy, the driver, and he hadn't seen Linux since he'd been thrown from the carriage, but now these boys were going to get their comeuppance. Connor stepped out ahead of the boys and spoke in a firm voice. "We only want the noble, we have no quarrel with you." Steadley looked him up and down, noting how he stood confidently while the rest of these runts fidgeted. He'd be the first to die and then the others would panic, and it'd be easy pickings for him and his men. He just needed to make it look like they were willing to cooperate. "We'd like nothing better than to head off to drink and whore, but you see our Lord provides the coin for our drinking and whoring, and he's not likely to be paying us if we abandon him to you lot." As he spoke, Steadley raised his hands away from his sword and moved slowly towards the boy with his steely eyes. "I don't think there are too many whores who'll want to lie with a corpse, do you?" asked Connor. "There's no need for threats like that now, lad. What say we buy you boys around the mead and we'll forget what's happened. Let bygones be bygones." Steadley was almost in striking distance, just a few more steps. You could see some of the boys were looking around uncertainly, as if considering the offer. That's all he needed, that moment's hesitation. It was one thing to take a life in the heat of battle, or when the red mist of anger descended, but it was a whole other kettle of fish, kill a man in cold blood, especially one who was offering you a way out of the situation. Connor began to speak, but before he could get the word out, an arrow came from the left and grazed the lead guard's temple. The man went to draw his sword, but before he could, Connor stepped forward and drove his spear up and through his neck. Steadley's mouth opened and closed noiselessly before the black blood bubbled forth. Then all hell broke loose. A group of boys broke from the trees and Connor recognised them as those he'd sent into the woods on various tasks. They must have returned to the camp and made their way to the road when they saw no one there. The guards were well equipped and armoured, but with the loss of their leader and the swelling of the boys' ranks, they were now outnumbered 6 to 1. The guards got some good swings in at the first few to attack, but when the main horde descended upon them, they had no room to swing with any force, and they couldn't defend from so many different attacks. The boys quickly overwhelmed them and took out all of the remaining guards, but not before 2 of the boys were outright killed, and another suffered such terrible wounds that he wouldn't see daybreak. Amid the whoops and hollers of triumph, Connor called for calm, and then they began to make their way towards the carriage. As they moved through the trees, Connor flinched as he noticed a figure up in a tree. He relaxed when he saw it was the other man who had been sitting atop the carriage. His eyes stared at nothing, and his head was at an unnatural angle. Before they approached the carriage, Connor had Adnan put an arrow in the stricken horse, who'd been screaming all through the encounter. With the horse silenced, Connor and 4 of the bigger boys moved to the carriage. He gestures for 2 boys to cover the far side, and for the other 2 to come with him. When they were in position, he reached for the handle and wrenched the door open, ready to confront the merchant. The merchant sat there clutching a bag of gems, with a tree branch through his guts. He'd bled out while the fight was raging. Connor briefly wondered if the lead guard would have had a different attitude if he'd known his master was already dead. He dismissed the thought and reached in for the bag and then began stripping the jewellery from around the man's neck and hands. One fine looking ring wouldn't come off no matter how hard he pulled. Connor sent the bulk of the boys back to the camp with orders to bury the 2 dead boys. He left Adnan in charge, took him out of earshot, and told him that they should bury Guth, the badly wounded boy, once he succumbed to his wounds. Connor and the group that stood before us had come direct from the conflict with the merchant's guards. "That's a fine tale," said Morden, "and it seems you'd be right about no one coming to look for the goods. So let's take a look at these gems of yours." Connor lifted his tunic and pulled out a bloody bag and tossed it on the table. A mix of opals, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, and other assorted gems spilled out, but every one of them was red on account of the blood they'd been soaking in. "Oh, and there's this one too," remarked Connor as he produced something from his pocket and threw it next to the bag. It was a sapphire big as a hen's egg on a gold ring with a finger still attached. All were as bloody and as red as the rest of the gems. Morden looked at the spill of stones and whistled. "That's a fine assortment you've got there, but may I offer a piece of advice? It might be a good idea to give the stuff a bit of a rinse in a stream next time." "I'll remember that," said Connor, smiling. The tension had been broken, and now it was down to the business of negotiation. "How much for the lot?" he asked. "I'll give you 400 gold and not a brass farthing more," stated Morden. "They're worth 10 times that at least. The ring's worth that alone," Connor scoffed. "They're worth 20 times that, and the ring double. Still 400 is me offer," said Morden. 800, countered Connor. 400, retorted Morden. "Okay, 600, said Connor grudgingly. 400's all you're getting from me. You're welcome to try selling them someplace else, but I bet you boys don't want word getting out that you come into some unexpected wealth," said Morden as he leaned back and crossed his arms. "Are you threatening to dob us in? The discount price is the cost of your silence," asked Connor. "It's more of an insurance policy, and the more business we do, the cheaper the insurance," Morden replied. "Okay, 400 it is, and we'll have plenty more business for you." Connor scooped up the money pouch that Morden tossed his way, and the gang left with their gold and a new name. Connor made good on his word, and the gang fenced plenty of loot through Morden over the years. That is until Connor killed them, shortly before the gang found their way here. Well, that's the end of tonight's tale. Should you wander back this way sometime, be sure to stop in for another Legend of Ellaria. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe consider hitting the subscribe button there on the right, or checking out some other videos here on the left. Or perhaps you might even share with some friends.